Would you like to experience a shift in your career? You may be frustrated to see the same workplace patterns repeat or feel that work lacks purpose, respect, or compensation. To get relief, you may have talked with friends or family, read books, watched YouTube, or taken courses. All good strategies if you get unstuck quickly and move towards your goal. But if you're frustrated with your progress, you need an expert guide to become the hero of your own work story. And that's where I come in. My name is Marie Gervais, and I help people move from work trauma to career transformation. With a doctorate in culture and learning in the workplace, certification in emotional freedom coaching, and as a training and development professional, I've helped hundreds of stuck career professionals gain new insights and release what is not serving them. So if you're ready to turn wishful thinking into a meaningful, well-compensated career and are hungry to experience the power of coaching to get you there, let's talk. Get a taste of what career success could be for you. Go to trycoaching.link/biz. Biz is spelled B-I-S. See you there. Hello, Culture and Leadership Connections podcast listeners. Today, I'm very excited to bring to you Martha Gleason, who has a singing and performance degrees with UCLA and is a national scholarship winner with the American Music and Dramatic Academy in New York City. Currently, she works with women leaders to find their voice and share a bigger story so that they can become beacons for their ideal clients. She is not only a professionally trained and award-winning stage performer, but she also helps her clients to speak powerfully by teaching strategic performance strategies for video and in-person presentation. As a certified mind-body expert, Martha teaches transformational tools for rewiring the stress response and pivoting into calm focus during high-stress situations. She helps her clients build the targeted messaging needed for video impact and to speak using their unique voice strengths. As an award-winning international sales trainer, Martha shares how to use your voice to win resources and projects. Martha's clients receive the actionable tools needed to find their voice and reach their full presentation potential. Welcome, Martha.
Thank you, Marie. I'm so happy to be here today.
I'm really happy to have you on the podcast. I'm sure the listeners are going to learn a lot from you.
I'm looking forward to sharing some things that people can start using right away.
Awesome. Well, first, we're going to delve a little bit into your past, your childhood, and the groups that have influenced you. So tell the audience a little bit more about who you are personally. Where did you grow up? Tell us about your family.
I'd love to share that. I grew up I was born on the East Coast of the United States, but I actually really grew up on the West Coast in the California region, San Francisco Bay Area. And I am one of 4 siblings. I'm the youngest. I have 3 wonderful older brothers. And from the beginning, really in school, people would always ask me, what is your favorite subject? And I would say singing. So that was something that started at a very young age for me.
Wow, that's great. Are the other children in your family also singers?
They really aren't, actually. They're athletes. Mm-hmm. So my oldest brother is a Hall of Fame swim coach, and we have a lot of athletics in my family, but performing is a form of athletics for sure. When you find your voice, you really are becoming an athlete. You need to be strong in your body. You need to be strong in your mind and your mental focus as well.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I think singing and also dance, athletics to a certain extent as well, together, I would say singing and dance allow the full development of that expression of yourself. I think coming into your body, doing them both is probably really, really useful.
Really important. In fact, I did dance for many, many years, from about the age of 7 all the way up to age 26, because my performance background is musical theater. And that's what I was doing through high school and all through my college years as a theater major, music minor at UCLA. I was doing musical theater. But an interesting thing happened for me, Marie, when I was at UCLA. I was in this paradigm of achieving and winning and competing. And I got myself into that paradigm of belief through some childhood traumas, and we all go through those. But I believe that a lot of my performance was winning, achieving, and competing, really to know in my own soul that I was worthy and that I was loved. And as I was doing that, and as I was stuck in that cycle of winning and achieving and competing, something happened. When I was 21 years old, I chose to go on semester at sea, which some of you may have heard of. It's a shipboard institute educational program run through the University of Pittsburgh. And you literally go on this large ship as an international student and you sail around the world. And we went to 13 different countries. Many of them were in the Far East. And what I didn't know at the time, because I was only 21 years old, was that I was starting to shift my paradigm from being self-focused, achieving, winning, and competing, to starting to expand my way of being, my consciousness, to include other people's realities. I was hearing other languages. I was seeing other cultures. This was before the internet. So there was really very little information in my little UCLA bubble to me about what it was like to be in India and China and Japan and Sri Lanka and Egypt. It was like I was on another planet. And what that did for me was it began to loosen the grip of the achieving, winning, and competing paradigm that I was operating in. And it began a lifelong journey of paying attention to my own inner world, learning to navigate my own inner emotional landscape, and understanding more about the stress response and a way of being that became easier and more of a flow than a fight to win and achieve and compete.
I really love that, because I think still the majority of people, when they think about success in their lives, are into this fight to achieve and compete model, which destroys us and others. It's not healthy. There are many collaborative ways of bringing wonderful things into the world and expanding opportunities and potential and prosperity for everyone that don't require beating the other person into the dust.
Absolutely. And I think especially after what we've gone through as a world, through the pandemic, through the political upheaval that we're seeing and the war on the planet that we're witnessing right now, and climate change and what that means for our resources and our sentient beings on the planet, our animals, our trees, our shrubs, our oceans. And we're learning that the way we were achieving and winning and competing before is no longer working. And what I'm seeing with my clients is that really are striving to find their voice and bring their unique talents and gifts so that they can experience a higher way of being, a simpler way of being. And I think that everybody's really receptive to that. We all know that what we were doing before wasn't working. It wasn't really serving us.
I think your approach really is based on the soul and the human spirit and the capacity of the human spirit to be so incredibly creative and to move towards the good. We've used the human spirit to destroy, but we don't have to stay there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you a few more questions about your childhood, because this is all great. And I'm really interested in diving into each thing you already said. But can you think of a couple of incidents from your childhood that stand out for you that you think were formative?
That's a really interesting question. Certainly when my parents were divorced, that was really formative for our entire family, because all of a sudden the tribe of six, as it were, was dissolving and becoming something different. And this was at a time when there weren't the same tools that there are now for families that need to go through a divorce. So counseling was just coming into being, but they didn't really have the tools that they have now. There's so much more information and ways that we can help people. For instance, my own mother really struggled mightily with depression and addiction. And she was given opioids to help her with her migraine headaches, but became quickly addicted to them. And we now know that opioid use disorder is a thing and it happens and it's treatable. You can get better from it, but that help just wasn't there for my mother. And so the impact it had on me was that when she was there, she was loving and supportive, and then she would disappear, as many people with addiction do.
Yes.
And I think that was very impactful for me, but really the singing pulled me out of that, because I had a significant teacher and mentor in high school that came into my life. She had been a former Metropolitan Opera winner. She won the Metropolitan Opera Awards, and she was a strong woman. She had a gorgeous voice, and she took me into her studio and she began to teach me. So I all of a sudden had this beautiful, strong role model in front of me, even though my mother was in fact falling apart. My voice teacher, her name was Zanelle, was this beacon that I could look to for strength and I could look to help me find my voice. That was life-changing.
Mm-hmm. I also had musical mentors as I was growing up. They were strong, but they weren't always positive role models. They were quite flawed, but they really had a big impact on my life. And if you have a positive role model when you really need it, I think it's pretty critical. Do you think that it was helpful in getting you to transform and to move beyond the difficulties of the family at the time?
100%. I think it saved my life because I had, and the research has shown that even if you have complex trauma in your childhood, which I certainly did, all it takes is one strong, positive mentor during those critical formative years to help you sort of right an overthrown ship. And that's what it did for me. And I think I really took off under her friendship and under her instruction, under her mentorship. And that's what I think really helped me get into the UCLA Theater Arts Department and start winning those performance awards. And I think as I started to win those awards and those roles and see my own potential, I began to heal. And that's why it has been so crucial for me to help others find their voice, because it's really giving back to the people that helped me along the way.
It is. And your voice is so important to your sense of who you are. I heard a documentary recently about someone who has a technology that allows people to speak sounds into a recorder, even if they're deaf, and other people can share their voice files as well. And then the app rounds it all out and turns it into what the voice would be if that person were hearing. And they can feel the vibrations, and they can use this app to speak their voice. This is people who are mute, people who are deaf, people who have a combination of the two. Or who have had surgery and lost their voice. And people are so transformed by hearing what feels like them. And even if they are deaf, feeling the vibrations of what that feel right for their body from the sound of their voice. Isn't that amazing?
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And it makes perfect sense, because I always say to my clients that your voice is your calling card, and how you show up with your voice really determines whether people can hear your message or whether they're going to tune you out.
Yeah.
So quality of your voice, intonation, pitch, rhythm, and then beyond that, what is it that you're choosing to share? Are the words and your sound bites in alignment with who you really are? Because if you try to present yourself or sound like anything besides your true, authentic self, it will never, ever work.
You know, that's interesting. I remember when I was a teen hearing girls trying to imitate their favorite pop singers. And to me, it always felt so fake. It was like putting glitter on top of a rock instead of one of those rocks that's been tumbled and you can see its real self coming through.
I love that. I love that. That's so beautiful. And it's true. And again, I think the tendency to try and sound like someone else, or be like someone else, or present like someone else, or sing like someone else, comes from the conditioning that we receive in our society, that we are what we have, we are what people say about us, and we are what we do.
Right.
When in fact, we are none of those things, but we're thinking that all the time. So we're looking out on the outside for people to praise us, essentially, right? Or to say, yes, I believe in you, or to pay us a certain amount of money, which then validates our own sense of self-worth, because we are trained that what you have is who you are.
Yeah. And if you sound like someone else and you get acknowledged for it, then that's more fuel to the fire to keep pretending.
Right. Yeah. Instead of just realizing that you yourself are a unique expression of really the infinite.
Totally.
That you have that spark within you. You came here for a specific reason, for a certain purpose, to share your unique light. That each atom within you is endowed with your own individuality.
Right. Which is such a beautiful message.
Yes. And that as we return to who we really are, which is why the mind-body practices are so important with my clients, because it has to start. I always say to my clients, I want to know you from the inside out, right? I need to know who you really are for us to find your voice, to awaken your voice.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that speaking from your strengths is so important, and building upon what your innate natural strengths are. If you're not a data-driven person, don't try and present a bunch of data. If you're ideational, we need to go with that.
So Martha, this is all really exciting, and I'm going to ask you more about it, but I wanted to also ask you a bit about groups that you were born into, right? So everybody's born into a family, they're born into a place, or they may have been born somewhere and then moved somewhere else fairly early on. They're influenced by the landscape, the geography. They're influenced by the social class, by the religion, by the school, by the language, by the nationality. Everything influences who we are. And so from the groups that you were born into, what stands out for you as having influenced your sense of culture and self?
I really think that being born into a family of ministers has really influenced my own sense of self, because I come from a family of 32 ministers.
Wow, that's a lot of ministers.
It's a lot of ministers. My own dad is a minister, was a minister, his father, his father, his father, and his father. And so we have this great family tradition of, I would say, faith, but also in a very sort of open, expansive, inclusive way. So you talked about geography. And so I think of the West Coast, where I really grew up, as my father's ministry was not really dogmatic. It was inclusive. And in fact, I remember going to my own grandmother's memorial that was on the East Coast in Poughkeepsie, New York. And she was married to my grandfather, who was a minister, and they were missionaries in China. In fact, she had 2 of her 4 children in China before there was modern medical care available there. We're talking I think it would have been in the 40s that they were there. Mm-hmm. Very unusual time for her to be there. She became fluent in Mandarin. But at any rate, on the altar at her memorial was a Buddhist priest, as well as a Sikh, as well as a Christian minister.
Interesting.
So it was a culture of inclusivity.
Yes, and recognizing the importance of the spiritual wherever it is and wherever culture it turns up.
That's it. So instead of being locked into a certain way, although they certainly were Christians, they saw the divine coming through all different paths, which was when it gave me permission to really be who I am.
Mm-hmm. Also unusual for the time.
Right. Very unusual.
Still unusual, because people still think that whatever they know and whatever they were born to is the only way there is, and everybody else is wrong. Which is why we have so much fighting in the world.
It's exactly right. It's exactly right. I mean, I was so privileged to be born into such an expansive approach to spirituality. It really allowed me to find my own path and to grow fully into it.
That's beautiful. So what about groups you chose to belong to as you grow up? You choose things. I mean, there's performing groups. There are so many professional groups. There's the coaching group. There's the mind body. There's that. There might have been other practices, or perhaps you learned other languages, or had friends that influenced you. What have you adopted into your own sense of self culturally?
That's a really beautiful question. Certainly the performing arts are really strong and at the core. So I still sing with a group called Portsmouth Pro Musica, and we sing classical master sacred choral works. So we just did, for instance, the Bach Cantata 140 for a Christmas concert, which was very beautiful. So I would say anybody in the performing world, I feel very connected to, and I have a very easy time speaking that language and feeling that sense of belonging. I think people that are creative, I'm very attracted to them as well, because being an artist and being a voice person, that's really, you're immersed in that creative reality. Another group that I've chosen for myself is Ananda, which is a global movement that focuses on the teachings of Kriya Yoga as they were brought from India, and the teachings of self-realization. So it's really a meditative path, and the path is one of energy and service and devotion. And so I'm very connected to Ananda throughout the entire world, and teach for them as well.
Sounds like that emerged from where you were already coming from. It's like it grew out of your roots and it just gave you branches and leaves and flowers.
Right. Exactly. Yes. I came in with that core, having the family I came from. My own mom, even though she was struggling with addiction and depression, was a very metaphysical, spiritual person. That culture sat around our kitchen table.
You know, people can be very spiritual and they can still have emotional issues. And this is
Sure.
something I've been quite interested in because oftentimes people think, oh, well, you know, as long as I'm spiritual or as long as I have a religion or a faith, then that will solve my emotional problems. And it's not true. It's simply not true. Or people will, on the other side, say things like, oh, well, you know, I have strong emotional intelligence, which is culturally bound, so I have trouble believing that one. But therefore, I don't need anything else in, you know, I don't need to know about the purpose in life or what I should be doing and how I should see myself in this world and the next, and that doesn't matter to me. I don't think either of those two are right. I think there are some crossovers, but they certainly require different approaches. It's like saying because you aren't malnourished, you therefore have disease. The disease and the malnourished, there's some overlap, but they're still separate things.
Absolutely. And I think that even if you have an inner life or a spiritual life, it's important that fuels you, right? That feeds your soul and that helps give you that broader context and expand your reality to include other people's realities and perhaps a divine reality. We're still human beings and we're still go through very challenging emotional journeys. We're living both realities, really.
We are.
You know, if you look at great teachers of any given path, they have all gone through tremendous amount of human suffering.
Yes. That's one of the things that makes them continue to be relevant indefinitely, because if they don't suffer, they don't go through the transformation process that continues to inspire over time.
Exactly. And the suffering, of course, is brought to us for our own growth opportunity. And so we're having all of these growth opportunities. It would be nice if there was an easier way, but unfortunately, I don't think there is. I think we have to go through really hard times to be able to move forward in whatever path we've chosen. We're always having those experiences. But at the same time, if we have an inner life, no matter what that looks like for you, that is a tremendous asset to staying on the surfboard when life makes all these waves.
Mm-hmm. For sure. You need both.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need both.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say you were born with temperament-wise? There are things that people, you know, you can see in young children. They have certain temperaments. I have grandsons.
That's so great.
One of them, the oldest one, is very much, you know, facts and figures and doing math on his napkins and in his mind. And the other one is like, how can I express myself? And here's an installation. And now I'll sing this and I'll act it out for you. Like they're both quite different that way. And you see those things in children from the time they're young. And then after that, they add on to their personality. Some things they round out, they add things on that are a result of overcoming or not overcoming the obstacles in their lives. And then finding or not finding opportunities to move forward. So that's why I wanted to explain a little bit too before I put the question to you. What would you say you were born with, your temperament, and what have you added on personality-wise?
I think that's a really interesting question. I would say I was born essentially a joyful person. So I feel a lot of joy and happiness within my own self, and I always have. And I think that has coupled with a very creative way of being. So I would definitely be like that second grandson that you mentioned, the one who's writing, acting, and playing it out. And I think I've added on to that through my years in business. And I've been in business for myself for over 20 years, my entire adult life, really. I have added on this very sort of strategic, practical side. And I've even taken some personality tests that show that I really run principally by intellect, which is so interesting to me as a creative person. But I really do like to see how things connect and how they kind of all add up. So that's something I think I've added on through having my own business for my entire adult life, is being practical in my joy. So,
you have to
yeah.
be when you're a business owner. It just doesn't. Otherwise, you don't eat, right? It's like
Right. You don't eat if you're not practical.
yeah,
Exactly. And I like to bring that to the people I work with because I think women, especially, and I work with a lot of women and a few good men, but I think women especially are conditioned to be the nurturers, to be the caretakers, to mold and bend and sometimes compromise. And I think that as we become stronger in ourselves and in some ways more practical, it's easier to stand up and say, this is what I really need, want. And this is not only what I need and want, but this is what's going to be best for everyone involved.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
From the me to we and the we to
Right.
we,
The
back and
me
forth.
to we. And I think also women are the caretakers of their relationships oftentimes, have been conditioned to be the caretakers of relationships. And therefore, we can have the tendency to compromise the truth because we are afraid of damaging the relationships we have.
Right.
In other words, if I'm really standing in my truth, am I going to somehow lose this relationship or compromise this relationship? I see that with my corporate clients because they may oftentimes, corporate women oftentimes will have superiors that are men. So sometimes they will hold back in a meeting, say, of saying something that really needs to be said because they don't want to challenge their male superiors and they're afraid of damaging that relationship.
And also reprisal.
Exactly.
So, can you think of a time when you became aware that your cultural understandings were specific to you and not just normal? For example, when your grandmother went to China, I'm sure that everything seemed strange to her.
Mm-hmm.
And the way she saw life was not the way she was experiencing it in China. Hence, during her memorial, there were all these symbols and people representing different religions that at first would have felt like a shock to her system. And afterwards, she would then have been obviously looking for things that were commonalities and that she could appreciate. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been such a strong part of her life. When I went to Japan, it was a huge shock to my system because of the hierarchy and because of so many other things that were there. And when I came back, there were things that I liked so much about the way the Japanese did things that I missed them terribly when I came back. And then sometimes you can know about something, but it still hits you. So, I mean, I knew about poverty in India. I knew about gender issues in India. But then when I went to Lucknow in northern India and I was experiencing it, I'm going, yep, I knew about this, but it didn't prepare me for the shock that my body went through.
Mm-hmm. I think there were many experiences that I had like that on Semester at Sea. I'm thinking particularly when I was in Egypt and I was in the Valley of the Kings and Queens, which is now a big tourist spot. But back then, there was nobody there. We had a hotel that we slept in on the floor that had no windows and no mattresses and no bedding. We just laid down on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
I remember it cost $1 a night. And the next day we got up and, well, a couple of things happened. I went into the village to find food and I saw the Egyptian women completely covered in black from head to toe in this hot, hot climate. And their faces, the little eyes you could see were just behind it looked like a cage in front of them.
Mm-hmm. The burqas.
Yes. And I was so shocked as this, privileged young white girl, essentially from Los Angeles, to see how these women were, in fact, completely imprisoned and controlled. And, again, until you see it with your own eyes, you can't really understand what that means. But I felt that very much in my body.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, my reality has been so privileged. And certainly you see that when you see the poverty in other parts of the world as well. I think it just makes you more grateful. It made me much more grateful for the freedoms that I have and the wealth that I have. Enough food, shelter, heat, freedom of expression, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Did it awaken in you any desire to alleviate the suffering of others?
That's an interesting question. I think it awakened compassion in my heart. I did not feel called to become a social activist for these women, although when the opportunity arises, I do, through my voting and through things online that I can see and get behind, petitions I can sign and things like that. But I think it helped me really to dive more deeply into the spiritual path. That's really what it spurred me on to do, to look at what was behind it all.
What we see on the surface that you experienced as being a shock that you felt in your body was not the reality of those women. That reality would take some digging to find.
Exactly. It would. And that was what we call in the yogic path, not my dharma. That wasn't my path to follow. But I do think that it shifted within me this paradigm of achieving, winning, and competing, to go back to the beginning. It started to make me realize that that wasn't what was really important.
Right.
What was really important was to go within and find my own power and my own joy and help others do the same.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, your path is to help others release their own creative potential and to speak their own voice.
That's it. That's
and sing their own song, speak their own voice.
Yes, sing their own. Yes, I have a little plaque in my house that says, "Your heart has a song, sing it." Mm-hmm. And I think that's what that experience did for me.
When my children were in primary school, one of the newsletters, they used to have a quote at the top of the school newsletters all the time. And one of them that stands out in my mind even today said, "Lift up your voice and sing. If only the birds with the most beautiful voices sang, the woods would be empty of song."
Beautiful. I love that. Because a lot of people come to me and they say, "Well, I don't like the sound of my voice." Or they say, "I don't have a good voice." Or they say, "My music teacher told me I should mouth the words." Mm-hmm. And not sing because I don't have a good voice. And I always say, everybody has a good voice.
Yeah.
It's your voice. We need all the textures and all the qualities because the voice carries the vibration of the person behind it. Just like you were saying, Marie, earlier, of those deaf people who got to hear the vibration of what their voice would have sounded like. Mm-hmm. Your voice is vibration. So it can only be beautiful because it's carrying your soul's vibration.
Yes. I'm really loving all the things you have to say. We're reaching the end of the interview, and I'm thinking that you probably would like to have a moment to pitch your services or give everybody an idea of how they can find you and work with you.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. The best way to reach me is on my website, which is marthagleasonvoice.com. And you'll find on that website a contact form, and you can reach out to me directly through that, and it will come right to me. You're not reaching out to an assistant, you're reaching to me. And I will respond to you, and we can get together and talk, because I do work with singers and I do work with people who are using their voice for presentation with their business. And so it depends what your goals are, whether you are trying to share a bigger story so that you do become that beacon for your ideal clients. I love working with women solopreneurs on that type of work because many women are just not really comfortable turning on a camera and leveraging the power of video to promote their businesses, which you really need to be doing now because that's what people are expecting. They're expecting a deeper connection with you. So I love helping people learn how to prepare for perhaps making a profile video for their website or using video messaging on LinkedIn, or if you have an important presentation coming up, how can you prepare for that so that you feel really calm and centered even when the stakes are really high and all the eyes are on you?
So let me just tell the listeners that Gleason is spelled Gleason. So Martha yes. Gleason, Gleason. And it will all be in the show notes, but just if people are looking for it afterwards, you want to make sure you get the correct spelling so they can find you.
Yes. And I'm also on LinkedIn under Martha Gleason Voice, and I am on Instagram as well under Martha Gleason Voice.
Perfect. Nice and easy to remember.
Yes. Easy to remember.
What brings out the best in you? If somebody hires you to work with them, what conditions or things bring out the absolute best in you, and what do you need to be at your best?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I really only work with clients who really want to do the work, right? So I have to have a client that's bringing their full selves to each session with me, and that there needs to be a receptivity to being coached, because it's really hard to help someone who doesn't think they need any help. So, it's really coming with your own openness and curiosity about what finding your voice really involves. And, at the corporate level, I enjoy working with managers who really want to help their team get better at speaking and get better at communication. So I need that corporate manager to really come with a desire to help their team to elevate their speaking and to move forward.
Right. How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb?
Exactly. So I would say that's
just one, but the light bulb has to want to change.
That's right. So that's really that's really the only criteria. Other than that, I would say just bring your authentic self when we work together.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
I think we've said it. I would like to say thank you for having me on this amazing podcast. I'm really interested to learn more about it. And I think you're just doing wonderful work in the world. So just my gratitude is all else I would like to say.
Thank you, Martha. The gratitude is mutual. I appreciate so much you coming on and telling us your story.
You're very welcome. And I wish you and all your listeners a wonderful day today.
Awesome. Same to you.
Thank you.
Martha Gleason wanted to be a singer and performer from the time she was young. From the experience of Asian and South Asian countries and cultures while she performed on a ship, she expanded her ideas about the world, allowing an intergenerational resonance with her grandmother's experience of having lived in China, learning Mandarin, and embracing the religions of the world. This full circle experience prepared the ground for Martha to become a mind-body coach, where she helps her clients find their true speaking and singing voices and learn to communicate their ideas more effectively through sound, visual presentation, and video. I really enjoyed my conversation with Martha and encourage you to share this episode with someone you think would also enjoy it. While I still have your attention, head on over to lovethepodcast.com/culture and leadership to rate and review our podcast. That's culture and the sign and leadership. lovethepodcast.com/culture and leadership. These good review algorithms are the food podcasts need to grow strong and healthy. Thank you for contributing to the well-being of this podcast, and may culture and leadership connections continue to guide and inspire your day. Want to show some appreciation? You can buy me a coffee. What? How do you buy a coffee for a podcast owner? Well, there's a way. Let me explain. You go to buymeacoffee.com/Marie Gervais. That's spelled MarieGervais. So it's buymeacoffee.com/Marie Gervais. And when you go to that website, what's going to happen is you'll get a chance to click on 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 cups of coffee at $5 a piece to help contribute to the cost of the podcast. And yes, it's $5 for a cup of coffee because it's quality coffee for a quality podcast. So I hope you will contribute and you'll help us to reduce the costs of the podcast by going to buymeacoffee.com/Marie Gervais. Thank you in advance for your generous contribution.